So like, this game doesn't require any kind of introduction, right? I mean, you could have literally never played it in your entire life, but I guarantee that you know it, and I highly doubt that you can't picture this game in your mind. Of course, Mario 64 is a well-regarded and well-respected game in the gaming community. It pretty much built the foundation for what a 3D platformer should be, and it paved the way in a time when 3D was only in its infancy. The quality and care that Nintendo put into this game is apparent by the fact that it's the second most speedrun game, only next to Minecraft, which is the most sold game in the world. That's pretty impressive that the game that only just made it into the top 50 sold games of all time is second to the most sold game, right? Honestly, I can see why it's been run so many times. The controls honestly could rival some 3D platformers today, and tricks like the BLJ are just fun to do, even if I've never been able to do one myself. But there is something of an opinion I have that I think lands me in an unpopular spot. See, I don't actually really like Mario 64, and I don't think I've ever liked it. I know this is sacrilege, especially after all the praising I just did, but this game just isn't my jam, which is weird, because I might not love the one with the 64s, but I do love the ones with the sunshines and the beaches or the galaxies and the Lumas, so what gives? It's pretty apparent when playing either Mario Sunshine or Mario Galaxy that these games take what the previous games had established and they improve on it. It's actually really cool to play these games back to back and experience this evolution of gameplay, which honestly just makes it a real shame that Nintendo was so weird about selling their 3D All-Stars collection. I luckily managed to get it while it was being sold, and it was while playing this that I realized what my problem is with Mario 64. And to save you the effort of watching this video, I'll tell you the answer right now. It's a combination of two things actually. The first being simply that I'm a baby who wants my hand held in video games. But the second one, and I think the more important one, is Mario 64 doesn't really do that great of a job when it comes to the whole show don't tell side of things. For context, the N64 is the first console I really remember playing. My dad had an SNES and I played some games for it, but I was a legitimate baby at the time and I couldn't figure out what to do in any of those games. Not to mention that while playing Legend of Zelda for it, I assumed that Link was a monkey, so I clearly had no idea what was happening. But by the time I started playing N64 games, I had a much better understanding of all this. Although I couldn't really read English at the time, I remember having a great time running around the courtyard and exploring Bob-omb Battlefield afterwards. But that's kind of where the memories end, because pretty shortly after, I would get bored and I'd go play some Ocarina of Time with my dad, or maybe I would just go throw a rock around outside, because at that point anything was more fun than Mario 64, and that was kind of weird. So why is it that I've always begun to lose interest after playing the first world of this game? Well, to answer that simply, I think we have to compare it to games that came out before and after it. Obviously, you know this, but before Mario 64, Mario games were side-scrollers. They didn't start off with a voiced clip from the princess or Lakitu explaining how the camera worked. You were just kind of thrown into there, and based on the fact that there were only 2 buttons and 4 directions, it doesn't take long to realize that the goal of every level is to run as fast as you can to the right. Mario's not the only 2D platformer to do this, as pretty much every 2D platformer played that way. Or at least that's the way I remember it from when I played them. I mean, just look at Sonic, which was its direct competitor, and all you really did was run to the right in that game as well. Overall, the point I'm getting at is these 2D platformers had a simple premise to pick up, but if you wanted to pull off some impressive tricks, you had to get a bit more skill in them. If we just briefly skip ahead to the 2000s and take a look at the Sonic adventure games, we can see that they more or less adopted this idea of run as fast as you can from point A to point B when you play as Sonic. Sure, you have an X, Y, and Z axis now to worry about, but the premise between the 2D and the 3D games stays relatively the same. You're not going to have a hard time figuring out what to do in these games, which is a big thumbs up from me. Mario, on the other hand, went in a different direction. Rather than translating the way the 2D games played into a 3D space, Nintendo took a different path, and they didn't exactly reinvent the wheel as much as they invented a whole wheel for what it meant to be a 3D platformer. Mario went from individual levels with one goal to larger, more playground-like environments, where exploration is encouraged, and in fact, in my experience, exploration is the only way you'll be able to beat this game. This wasn't a bad decision by any means that Nintendo made, and I think it's actually kind of funny that Sonic games became more linear in a 3D space, whereas Nintendo games became more open in the 3D space. Because back in the 2D spaces, Sonic games were often praised for having multiple paths, while Mario games often had one set goal with little reason to deviate off the path. Now, even though I think the choice to move away from running from point A to point B type of levels was a good idea, I think it was a bit poorly executed in this game. See, here's the thing. When you hop into the painting, you're shown a level select screen with pretty basic titles for which level you're going to play, like Big Bob-omb on the Summit or a foot race with Koopa the Quick. These are pretty easy goals to understand, and without being spoon-fed, I can deduce that I need to go up the big mountain or that I need to race this turtle who wasn't here before. But these simple titles get less descriptive and, dare I say, they get far more cryptic, to the point where I feel like I'm trying to deduce a riddle that doesn't really have a logical answer. I mean, sure, it's logical when you finally hear the answer, but it's not something that you would have thought of. Or at least it's not something that dumb me would have thought of. I mean, look at Whomp's Fortress, which there's a pretty good chance that that's going to be the next world you'll go and explore after Bob-omb Battlefield. Titles like Shoot into the Wild Blue or Blast Away the Wall don't make a ton of sense. Like, what does it mean to shoot into the wild blue? Sure, you've got a cannon, but like, I don't know where the star is in this level, and half the time that you fire yourself, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to end up dying in, well, I guess the wild blue that is the skybox. Even as a kid, I only got the star on this level by accident because it's easier to wall kick up there than it is to use the cannon. Blast Away the Wall was a whole other jar of worms. So you have a cannon again, and there's a couple of walls in this level, but I guess it's fair to assume that you need to blast the lone wall, except when you fire at it, you just bonk off of it. Maybe through some trial and error you could figure out that you need to hit the corner of it, but as a kid I just assumed that this was the wrong wall, and honestly I don't think I ever figured out what I was supposed to do here until I ended up seeing it on YouTube many years later. And the thing is, every painting feels like this. You read some kind of cryptic riddle, and you can just feel Miyamoto laughing at you as you try to figure out where to go or what to do. But compare this to Mario Sunshine, a game which I actually really enjoyed playing, and almost immediately you'll notice the difference once you hop into the first world. See, every time you enter an area, you get a little cutscene that plays that shows you an area of interest that you should go check out. There's no mystery as to which cave you need to explore in this level, as the game will just show you which of these two caves needs to be checked out, and I really appreciate that. You can call it hand-holding if you want, but at least I'm not spending an eternity just wandering around until I get bored and go do something else. This is part of that natural evolution thing that I mentioned I enjoyed seeing. Sure, you can't pull off a BLJ in this game, or really an LJ for that matter, but overall I find this to be a much more enjoyable experience to play, as a lot of the guesswork is taken out and I can just enjoy myself. Perhaps this is different if I were a speedrunner or if I was somebody who played these games less casually, but as a casual player, I tend to lean more towards this style of gameplay. It's not like I want Flood to work like Navi on Adderall and constantly stop me to let me know where to go or what to do, but I do need some direction when I'm playing a game, or else I'll just move on to something that has that direction I'm looking for. I get it that there's some overall view on people who enjoy hand-holding in video games as being lesser or even ruining video games in general. And don't get me wrong, like I said, I'm not asking for the game to stop me every 5 seconds to remind me of what to do, but I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting to be shown what to do or to be given a nudge in the right direction. I think that games can do a really good job when it comes to showing and not telling, which is something that games like Mario Sunshine really excel at, and it's something that Mario 64 I think really struggled with. It's not necessarily a hit against Mario 64 as this was brand new and it probably wasn't a big thing they had thought of at the time, but it is a big reason as to why I don't think I ever really enjoyed this game. Overall, this new direction seems like a better way to get new players interested in games, and it keeps longtime fans like me more interested in playing it rather than just wandering around aimlessly in hopes that I'll find some shiny star. I'm actually quite curious if you're a fan of Mario 64, or if the main points that I brought up in here at all resonate with you. And just out of curiosity, although I do know this is impossible, I would wonder that if you had the chance to re-experience Mario 64 without knowing anything about any of the Mario games previously, do you genuinely think that you would enjoy it as much as you do now, provided that you are, of course, a fan of it? Because without a childhood or a bunch of guides to tell you what to do, I feel like it might not be as fun. I'm sure some people do enjoy this type of exploration though that was introduced in Mario 64, and I'm not knocking you if you do, but it's just in general not my cup of tea. However, if there are some counterpoints, I would love to hear them, so please let them be known in the comments. Other than that, that is the end of the video, and I want to thank you for sticking around this long. Of course, if you haven't, be sure to like and subscribe, comment if you feel like commenting. Overall, I've been really enjoying doing these style of videos just about things that interest me, but I would love to hear maybe some topics that interest you and things that you might want to hear in the future. Or maybe any comments or criticisms, of course, are always accepted. Other than that, I hope you have a great day.